is Trina Reynolds Tyler. I'm from the south side of Chicago. I am a Pulitzer Prize winning data journalist who primarily investigates police misconduct in Chicago. And it is my distinct honor to be here today to talk about transparency laws and access to records of police misconduct, full investigative files in the state of California, which is huge. We're gonna start off with a conversation with the founder and executive director of the Anti-Police Terror Project. We're gonna move into a more technical talk around how we wrangle and manage lots of documents and data related to police misconduct records. And then we're going to finish this evening with a panel of a few folks who are experts in their own lived experience. And so I just want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for your future thoughtful questions that I'm sure that you will ask. And also for your respect for your peers. It's mutual respect in this space. We're not here for disrespect. We're here for curiosity. And so I would welcome and encourage you all to lead this evening with curiosity. We all have different lived experiences. Don't yuck my yum is one of those terms, which is like, although this is my lived experience and it's not necessarily yours, doesn't mean that you have to be dismissive or stomp on, something that may appear to be different than you. Are we good? Are y'all with me? Okay, period. Before I introduce our first discussion, I'd just like to say that this event is co-sponsored by the Anti-Police Terror Project, Berkeley Institute for Data Science, Community Law Enforcement Accountability Network, the National Police Index, and the Human Rights Data Analysis Group. All of these organizations in their own way have contributed in the most interdisciplinary way to this field. We want to respect all of the folks in the space, from the people who have lived experiences with loved ones who have passed away from police, the violence at the hands of the state, all the way to the data scientists who sometimes just live in a cave looking at these records and piecing together stories of people. It's something that in this context works hand in hand. And so I just want to bring my Kat Brooks to the stage. Give a round of applause for Kat Brooks. She's an activist, a community organizer, an artist, co-founder and executive director of the Anti-Police Terror Project, which was created over 15 years ago, which is to speak to how long this journey that folks have been on, at the very least, right? Because that was a place where an organization was created and cultivated. And so there was quite a lot that came before that. Okay, so welcome. Another round of applause for Kat. Thank you so much. Now, Kat, what is the role of transparency in advancing police accountability and justice for survivors of police violence? Like, what is the role of transparency, generally speaking?
The first thing I want to say is there's no such thing as justice when we're talking about police terror and the stealing of our community members' lives. Justice would be Eric Salgado at the table with his sister. Justice would be Oscar Grant with his daughter. Justice would be, right, the loved one coming back. That once they have engaged in murder, that can't happen. So that's the first thing. But in terms of transparency, it helps infiltrate or crack little teeny tiny bit the blue wall of silence, right? A lot of families, especially before these laws were passed, but still, and we'll get into that in a minute. But one of the things I hear from the families that I have the honor of working with over and over again is, I just want to know what happened. Right, so denial of information is one of the ways that police continue the terror, right? So the first act of terror is the murder of the loved one. And then there's many more acts of terror that happen to intimidate the family, to punish the family if it looks like they're gonna speak out, and to protect the bad actors, right, that committed the murder. And so transparency allows there to be a more level playing field conversation if and when it actually happens, right? And we'll talk about that as well. It also is a tool, or can be a tool, for cracking the false narrative that the cops are our friends or that they bring safety to our communities, right? Part of the problem with not having a national database that actually, like a state one, that actually, or mandate that they are supposed to track the number of people that they murder every single year, is that the public actually has no idea, right? So when we have these flashpoint cases, like in Oscar Grant, or like Eric Garner, or like a George Floyd, there are so many people in America who think that's it, right? That there's such an uproar because it's an anomaly for this to happen, as opposed to they murder 3 people a day. So the more transparency we have, the more we can create a more accurate narrative about the role that law enforcement plays in this country. You look like you want me to stop talking.
Honestly, let me tell you, because I have a couple questions that are not on this piece of paper, just based off of the thing that you said here, though, because one of the things that Amanda, one of our panelists later, spoke to before was about how, like, public records, this piece around, like, something happens, right? We want to know what happened. And so then we attempt to leverage public records laws, or, phone a friend, phone a lawyer, phone whomever in our community who can help us to claw at the state in order to get the evidence for us to get closer to that answer. And then on top of that, right, the families experiencing this, like, moment of despair, having to then fight for access to transparency of information, that can be quite heavy and exhausting, let alone, like, the other steps that come into picture once you actually gain access to the records. Did you want to speak?
I just want to start with the insanity that's what you have to go through to get public records about who are in theory civil servants that are getting paid with your tax dollars. Like, let's just start there. Like, the laws that we're about to talk about, the fights that they should have never have happened. If I am paying you to do a job that is supposed to be in service of the community, and you massively fuck up that job, I have a right to know how you fucked up that job. And if in the fucking up of that job, you stole one of my community members' lives, if I kill somebody in the line of the work that I do, trust and believe, I'm gonna have to tell them what happened. It's gonna be out there for everybody to know about. But for some reason, that badge and that gun, we know the reason, right? But that badge and the gun shields the people that are supposed to be in service to the community when they harm the community. So I just want to start with, it's nuts that we're having this conversation to begin with. It's asinine and it's insane. And yes, right, I can't, you're going to have family members, so I don't want to speak for family members, right? I can tell you that my experience with, at this point, hundreds and hundreds of family members, to be able to get up to answer the door in the first few months, let alone have to fight bureaucracy to find out what happened to your loved one, right? It's not possible, which is why it is important for there to be solidarity organizations that are actually in solidarity, not looking for fame or fortune. That's another panel. I know, not this one, but it's important for me to say. It is important for me to say, and it'll be echoed by I'm sure by the family members that come up afterwards. And it is important that we have these fights and these public conversations about laws and being able to access public records. And it's important for journalists who care about these issues to be able to access that data, so that when the activists or the organizers or the families don't have the energy, or we get the blocks, right, that there are allies inside of the media that are actually going to tell these stories on our behalf.
Thank you so much. That was really a word. And I hear some clapping already. You could feel free to snap and clap and engage. I feel like this is our gathering space. There will be a lot of high emotional energy, and I just feel like we should be able to sit with that and move through it as things occur. Now, in the city of Chicago, I'm data director at Invisible Institute. There are some folks here who have previously worked at Invisible Institute, Rajiv, Sakari, also members of the Clean Project who work really closely with the Invisible Institute. In the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois, police misconduct records became public information in 2014 because of a lawsuit related to the assault of a Black woman in public housing, who dared to document her story and pull up and sue the state. But in the state of California, we had SB 1421 in 2018, which made internal police documents about misconduct and extreme uses of force related to public records in California related to it made it public record in California. Now, I'm curious, like before we had this access of we can submit a FOIA request, we can do this information gathering as a community through the state. What was access like before that, and what can you tell us about the work required to even get this legislation to make this information public happen?
It was more non-existent than the level of non-existence it's at now. I'm gonna run that back. It was more non-existent than the level of non-existence is at now. In theory, 1421 made records accountable. In theory, right? The way that the state, and I'll answer your question. I'm gonna go backwards. That law got passed, and we were all jumping up and down. This is one of the laws. When APTP first started, we didn't do policy. We were like, this is a waste of our time. Policy is about fixing stuff. Policing ain't, that cliche, that's so true. Policing ain't broken, right? We have no interest in fixing it. We want to tear down the whole thing and start all over again. Then we got off of our college-educated high horses and really looked at the conditions of our people, and we were like, it's too dire, it's too severe to not be all roads in. But we decided we were going to advocate for policy on our own terms. We weren't going to do it on the terms set by the state. We weren't going to do it inside of the boxes set by the state. We were going to do it with the mission of not just tinkering around the edges of the behemoth nightmare that law enforcement in this country is, right? But we were going to do what we call radical reforms, or some people call it reformist reforms. We were only going to engage in policy fights that actually started to chip away at the institution as we worked towards building something else. So we never did anything around body cameras. We're never going to say anything about let's waste another dime on cultural competency training for police, like none of that garbage, right? And so 1421 for us, right, it was about, again, the things I talked about earlier, breaking through the lie of what policing is in this country, being some sort of a balm for our family members so they could at least know what happened to the loved one, right? Because the police lie, right? They lie. I mean, that's just it. We all know that. We're all in agreement in this room, right? The pigs lie. That's what they do. And especially when they do something wrong, right? They are actually trained in their training, not officially on the books, but in their training, they are trained. What are police literally trained to say when they kill somebody? I feared for my life. They are trained to say. That's why it's the first. Sometimes the investigator don't even get the question out of their mouth, right? They walk in the door. I'm afraid for my life. I'm afraid for my life. Because there was a law. That law doesn't. We changed that law here in California. Because legally, right? That's all they say. I feared for my life. It doesn't matter if they feared for their life or not. If they were having a bad day, or that black man just had too big of a mouth on him, or whatever. Whatever reason that they had for murdering our loved one in that moment. So they lie. And then they demonize the character of the person that they murdered. Right? So they kill them, they lie about why they killed them, and then they demonize the person. And it's always that the person that they murdered was doing something so egregious that they couldn't back up and wait, that they couldn't use a taser, that there was nothing else they could do but shoot Sonia Massey in the face. Right? That's all they could do. And so it was really, really important to them to keep them records close to the chest, because if them records get away from them chest, then we are able to start to pry apart and actually get to the actual story of what actually happened, which leads to greater accountability. So before this bill, and I'm gonna argue post the bill, I'm gonna tell why. Before this bill, there was nothing. It was just a roadblock. We don't have to tell you the rights of the police officer. We have something called the Police Officers Bill of Rights, and most states do. Their rights are more important than your rights, than our rights, right? And so the protection of what actually happened was, well, we got to make sure that the officer is okay. We got to make sure that his life is safe. We got to make sure that he can move to another community, another city, and do the exact same thing, and you're never going to know what actually he did or what happened. And so our families were, I just remember we had this one family member, Teresa, and this was like a really big piece for her and her mourning, is she just wanted to know what happened to her son. And I'm saying Teresa because we got this law passed, and a bunch of us were excited that we got this law passed. And then Teresa went and she did her thizzle and asked for the records. Thousands, and I can't remember, somebody here probably remembers exactly, $4,000 they wanted to give the mother the record of the ways in which they murdered her baby. So from bonfires to egregious fines to ridiculous. Annie Banks, who used to work for APTP, filed when we won this in 2018. She filed for a set of family records. I'm not going to break company and say who. I got them shits 6 months ago.
No, that's real. I mean, what you're really speaking to is, on the policy tip, accessibility doesn't mean availability, or availability doesn't mean accessibility. They're available, but it's going to be a skip, jump, and a hop to get access to them, right? And as a journalist, someone who is investigating police misconduct records, who is interested in gathering the evidence related to these kind of topics. I mean, it's like, how can you tell a story when you have no evidence related to corroborating them, right? You have families who are distraught. You have law enforcement who are scared for liability, and then you also have bystanders who are attempting to piece together the pieces. Now, I could talk to you for a very long time. I think especially on, all of this, especially related to like what access looks like. But I want to close us out today as between you and I around this decertification act. So later on, after it's like, okay, these police investigative records are now public information. Y'all are going to have to pull teeth and nail to get them, but eventually you will have them. And then SB2, the Kenneth Ross Jr. Decertification Act, created a system for decertifying police officers who commit serious misconduct. Why is it important? Why is decertification important, and how does it fit into the broader goals of police accountability and justice for survivors? I know you said is no justice, okay, but I do want to understand, in the context of decertification as a means for accountability, what is the impact of that on survivors?
So I'm going to say why I think it's important in theory, right? Why decertification is important. I'm going to say what I learned, how this bill in particular shifted the way that I think about policy and what we have to shift moving forward. And then I'm gonna close on something I think we all need to sit with in this political moment. So one of the biggest reasons that decertification is important is because it prevents something called a lateral move. And I feel like I'm talking to experts in the room, so I apologize because most of you already know this, right? But a lateral move is when a police officer does something horrible. Hey, let's say like Miguel Masso, who murdered Alan Bluford, who came from New York, not as lateral, but came from New York, where he had bodies on his jacket there. Then he came here and he murdered unarmed 18-year-old Alan Bluford as he ran away from him, not knowing he was a cop. And then he went somewhere around Gilroy. And the only reason why we know that he went there, and we ran, and power to the shout out to the people, because we ran Miguel Masso up out of here. That man couldn't pull over nobody without being surrounded by people screaming murder, or people we had for wanted signs up for that motherfucker. Where? Morgan Hill. The only reason why we know that he went up there is because Mama Geraldine, Ellen's mother, got a phone call from a distraught woman up there saying, I was Googling this cop and you came up, and he pulled my elderly father out of the car and beat him within an inch of his life. So decertification is important so we don't have any more Miguel Massos, right? It's important for survivors because it does pose a form. The families that I work with, they not only fight for their loved one every day, they fight for all of the families, and the mantra is never again, right? And so when we're able to take, they're all bad cops, but when we're able to take the bad cop that got caught off of the streets, right, that's for the family members a bit of a bomb. At least that cop is not gonna be able to hurt anybody else again. Uncle Bobby is going to talk more about the actual process, and so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I can tell you where we fall down again and again and again and again on this legislation thing is implementation. We get this really radical legislation passed that's meant to dismantle the way that the state moves and engages in our communities, and then we hand it right back to the system that we're trying to tear down to implement. And then there's this moments that we discover in the process, like Like the first body for the SB2 for the decertification has law enforcement on it. And when you go back to that body, even after the recommendation is made, there's law enforcement on it, right? So we have got to start thinking about being just as focused on the language of implementation to make sure that the bills are doing what they're actually supposed to do, because the state that's not going to do it, don't want to do it, right? And then we just end up mad. And now we've spent 1 year to Crisis Act, 2 years of our lives, right, to end up in the exact same space. The final thing I'm going to say, because it's more important that the families have as much time as possible. None of this means shit anymore. That's what time it is. There's a fascist in the office. The courts don't mean nothing. The lawyers don't mean nothing. Your policies don't mean nothing. The rules don't mean, they mean something for documentation, right? They are coming back here. A lot of people was hopping up and down. Oh, we kicked them out of here in a day and a half. We won. We didn't win shit. Trump told you what he was going to do last year. He's doing it and then some this year. So we had started to better have some really serious conversations about what it means to not have, the courts ain't never worked for people of color no motherfucking way, but we better start having some very real conversations about the fact that the courts don't matter or work for anybody anymore. He comes to Oakland and he gonna have to invoke the Insurrection Act here. We know that. He ain't gonna have no choice. That means nobody has rights for anything. He has effectively taken whatever leash we imagined was on American law enforcement to begin with, it no longer exists. So we need to be having some more different conversations. We plan on having some of those with you all, but I couldn't finish without that.
No, I thank you so much. Give a round of applause for Kat Brooks for us tonight. This concept, right? Policy does not always equal practice. It's critical in these conversations, because just because a policy is written down doesn't actually mean that it's being implemented in the way that legislators it believe that it would be. And so thank you again, Kat Brooks. We are so thankful for you. This community is thankful for you and for the Anti-Police Terror Project. Keep it up. The next person on our agenda, on our run of show, is Galen Mancino. Galen is a program manager for the Police Records Access Project. Come on up, Galen. Come on up. A proud resident of the town, which I'm learning is Oakland, because I'm from the city. For over 13 years, he now splits his time between here and Brooklyn. Prior to joining this project, Galen worked in open source software development as a maintainer of the Arches project software for cultural preservation and digital heritage. And I feel that that is so important, right? Cultural preservation and digital heritage, given that so much of the work that we're talking about today is about preserving history, about archiving events that have happened in time in an effort to learn from them so that they don't happen again. And so thank you for being here with us, Galen. Another round of applause for Galen. Another one. Thank you so much. Okay, so the Police Records Access Project. Has anybody heard of that before? The police? Okay, we got some familiar. We'll come to it towards the end of our talk. Was able to leverage this newly public information Kat and I talked about, right? To create a database everyday people can use to search serious uses of force and police misconduct across numerous agencies in the state of California. Now, who are the people that came together for this, and what is the scope of those misconduct records that came to the public?
Yeah, thank you, Trina, and thank you, Kat. It's hard to follow up Kat Brooks. She is a legend, and anyway, thank you, Kat Brooks and APTP. This project wouldn't be here without them. The project that I work on, the Police Records Access Project, it dates back to a group of stakeholders in both law enforcement transparency as well as domain expertise to bring about this database, lawyers, technical folks, journalists, other folks with other expertise. So we're talking about a kind of large consortium. We have the University of California, Berkeley, Institute for Data Science, the UC School for Journalism, Investigative Reporting, the Berkeley Law School, the UC Irvine Law School, ACLU of Southern California, the Innocence Project, big local news initiative at Stanford University, and to this date, our team is made up of folks from these organizations on a day-to-day basis. And we formed to build the largest database for police misconduct in California and also ensure that it meets the mandate of the law that funded it. I mean, Kat made a comment about how, implementation is key, right? Great intentions only go so far. And we are really trying to meet that mandate of, does this database actually do what it's supposed to? Is it accessible to people? And is it bringing about some measure of accountability? And you asked about what kinds of misconduct, right?
Yeah.
So the law, SB 1421, it covers 3 different kinds of misconduct. So if a police officer discharged their firearm, even if they didn't hit anyone, any record pertaining to that is disclosable. And if they didn't shoot their firearm, if they just used force on someone that resulted in bodily harm, that is also disclosable to us. We try to get records where anyone was injured in any capacity, even if it's, being handcuffed. I mean, there are so many instances where they'll say it's not injury, but, we know it is. There's also the sexual assault category. So even if an officer solicited sex or they coerced sex while on duty, that's disclosable. And lastly, a category called dishonesty, which it's an odd name for a category for police officers. But it's any time that they engaged in dishonesty in investigation, reporting, prosecution of a crime, filing false reports, testifying untruthfully, planting evidence, anything like that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, I just want to take a moment to talk to us a little bit about the universe of data before we go into the cutting edge computational tools that went into creating and cultivating this database. Because although it was quite a lot of data, it wasn't everything that was made available, that is possible, right? In order for someone to be, have a sustained complaint of serious misconduct, it requires someone to come forward and actually name that something has happened to them. So I do want to do a little bit of a activity. If there, and before I do this activity, actually, I would like to name, obviously there are a lot of cameras in the room. We are documenting this. I meant to say this at the very beginning of our panel, or of our discussion, I'm sorry. If you do not want to be seen in these video recordings, let Z know, and it will be very clear that you are not a part of it. But I'm curious, how many people in the room have maybe had a negative encounter with police? Just a negative encounter with police. Okay. So this piece of paper is a symbol of that negative. Keep your hands up. Negative encounter with police. Now, how many of you filed a complaint related to the misconduct? Hands are going down. Lots of hands are going down because honestly, the act of filing a police complaint takes a lot of effort and labor, and it's actually quite exhausting. Now, of the people who filed a complaint, how many of your complaints were sustained? How many? Oh, we just went down another notch. Now, I want you to, as we embark on the rest of this tech talk, as we talk about the terabytes of data that these folks on this project went through, I want you to think about the universe of data that we're talking about. We are not talking about all of the circumstances and instances that were related to negative encounters with police misconduct. We are talking about instances where either there was great bodily harm, so there was literal evidence that this had occurred, or someone took the time out of their day to continue down the path of filing a complaint and ensuring that they had the evidence required to sustain it in the face of a whole lot of barriers, okay? Are y'all with me? Thank you. Now, availability doesn't mean accessibility. It's something that Kat Brooks and I were just talking up here about. Now, when transparency laws are introduced, why is it incredibly important to immediately collect, organize, and preserve records as soon as you can?
That's a great question because, as Kat Brooks mentioned, these documents are available theoretically, right? But there's a wide gap between that and actually, having them in your hand. And as soon as the law passed, there were news outlets reporting about how, for example, Fremont Police Department was shredding their documents because they didn't want to disclose them. How is that not a crime? How is destroying evidence not a crime? So the only parties that are fully aware of which the files these are, where they exist, are the law enforcement agencies themselves. And they have acted in ways to hinder our efforts to uncover law enforcement misconduct. I want to give a quick shout out to one of my colleagues, Lisa Pickoff-White, who for several years has been working before this law was passed to request documents related to police misconduct using Public Records Act requests, along with Bay Area News Group and KP, what's the NPR affiliate? KQED, excuse me. So anyway, the files that we get, even if we get them, they don't always tell the whole picture, right, of what happened in an incident, what transpired. Which is why it's essential that as people use this website and access this database, they're comparing these files and the stories they tell against other sources of truth. So we're talking about civil proceedings and suits. We're talking about journalistic reportings, other civilian complaints that may not even have seen the light of day. It's got to be comprehensive. And I'll say that we, members of our team, in coordination with the UC Irvine School of Law, are actively making records requests all the time with agencies, with district attorneys, sheriffs, you name it. And the best way that they can actually get what they're asking for, unfortunately, is if they already know what happened, if they already know the who and the what and the when. Otherwise, there are so many ways to get stonewalled from getting the documents.
Thank you so much. And as you're talking here, it's not just like a document. This is like a body-worn camera, a photograph, there are all of these different parts of the investigatory process where evidence is generated or evidence is provided. And that's quite a lot of information. I know we're running low on time. I'm not going to cut us off, but I do want to name that. Me and Galen could talk for some time. So just how much data of that little bit that we're talking about, this limited drop, how much data were you ultimately able to collect? And how much data were you able to ultimately collect?
It's a great question. And we don't just get PDF file documents. We also get body-worn camera footage. We also get audio, transcribed papers. We get images. I mean, there's photographs of just a bunch of stuff on a table with a picture of an evidence report. It almost seems like they're trying to make it harder for us sometimes. So we get all kinds of files, and sometimes the PDF is 1,000 pages. And so then we have to wade through it and figure out, okay, where does one document start and one end? And my colleague Tarek over there, who helped organize this event, is working on that. Thank you, Tarek. And so we do this so that we can look at the PDF we got from the medical examiner, right, to show us. And often, unfortunately, medical examiners work for the sheriffs. So it's already a very biased point of view. But we try to get the document from the medical examiner and match it up against the document from the sheriff, and then match it against the document from the district attorney. And all that together, we're trying to provide one holistic case for you to see, who did what, when, and where. And in terms of how I can talk about how we process the files. Yeah. It's an enormous task. I mean, we're talking about dozens of terabytes of data.
What's a terabyte?
What?
If you want to put documents in this room right now, how many?
Is it 1,000 gigabytes? I should know this. Is it 1,000 gigabytes? Yeah.
It's a lot.
So it's hundreds of thousands of gigabytes. Hundreds of thousands of gigabytes. 1,000 megabytes. Yeah. It's a lot. And so how
do you work through it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't, Ayub does. No, we use AI tools, and I want to be we will all be very transparent about how we use it, and we're always talking about the problems with AI, not just the environmental footprint, the ethical concerns, the privacy concerns, right? We are working with imperfect tools so that we can get something better with the limited amount of firepower that we have and time that we have as well. And so we use AI tools to kind of do like rough passes over these documents, like roughly summarize what is this about, who are the officers involved, what are the dates that we should be looking out for, these kinds of key facts. And then we usually put these data points through a human review process where, especially if we're trying to say which officer specifically fired the gun, we're going to have a human pair of eyes look at that before we put it in front of your eyes to say, hey, we fact checked this.
Thank you so much. And I feel like that gets to the question which was next on my list, which is like, how are you dealing with accuracy? Like, are you concerned that this AI is hallucinating and things? What it sounds like you have a protocol and a process which is lenient on technology and also human validation in order to ensure that what is ultimately living and breathing on this database is you have trust and some level of certainty it is accurate. Now, in this moment, we've been talking about this database. I would like, if you have a cellular device, can you just pull it out and pull out your phone and just pull up the database? I'm not going to ask for us to do the most right now, but I just want you clean, CLEAN .calmatters.org. There's a QR code somewhere hanging out. Maybe it was on your seat. Just open it up. Okay, if you never go back to this database again, just take a look today. As the people who were a part of creating it are here, as well as the family and family members of the folks whose stories live within this database are here to talk to us. I wanna give us an opportunity to maybe look something up collectively. Do folks have it up? Go ahead now.
Well, I was going to say, do you want to do the cane?
No, please. Yes, please.
Okay. So you can, like, what you're searching for in this database right now. This is version 1, by the way, folks. We're releasing like a version 2 in the next couple of months, and we can't wait to tell you more about it. But for right now, if you type in a search term, you will be searching over like the scanned text over all of the PDFs that we have. And we're still going through a lot of PDFs that we're like vetting. So this is still kind of like a fraction of everything we have. But for example, if you want to know about cases where a K9 unit was deployed, you could search for the letter K and the number 9, or you can try either of them. You could try K-9. It'll have somewhat of a fuzzy search. So it might say like, oh, did you mean, the word K9 if nothing comes up. But you can search any word. You can search carotid, you can search K9, you can search the name of an officer, and it will show any cases where that name has come up. Granted, if it's a very common name, like if you're trying to search among, LA County Sheriff or LAPD, there's a lot of people who have the same name. So, we don't yet have the sort of unique officer feature, but that's one entry point. And you can filter by county. So we recommend, if you have a case or an officer that you're interested in learning about, we recommend selecting the county where it happened, Alameda County, wherever, and then enter your search term in that search bar.
Thank you so much. And while you all are taking a gander, doing a scroll, looking at the literal documentation of people who have experienced K9 bites or, a serious bodily injury, I'd like to hear from you, Galen. What comes next? Like you said, this is V1, right? We have about 50 people up in here looking on the website, maybe typing in a name, maybe typing in K9 in order to gather more insight around what information is now made accessible to them. Now, what is the next iteration of the project? What comes next?
Yeah, so we have a long list of things we want to give because this is your money. This is taxpayer funded. So we want to make sure we get the most out of it that we can up until the last day we're employed. We know that people really want to be able to search by officer. Like if you have a particular officer, you want to know, well, which cases are they in, and you want to make sure it's this one and not someone else with the same name. So we are going to be publishing a fact-checked list of every officer that we can identify in over 10,000 cases who have committed, who have used force in any capacity, right? There was a canine, they did a carotid hold, they discharged a weapon at somebody, whatever, as well as an identified officer for over 2,000 cases of misconduct. So the dishonesty, sexual assault, and we're going to cross-reference these officers. So we're going to basically say, what's the name of the officer from the document? We're going to cross-reference every single one of those names with a database that the state gives us of employment history. So all of the police employment records, we're going to match up. And we're going to have a link on our site so you can click to the National Police Index, which my colleagues Tarek and Ayub here also work on, and you'll be able to see where else have they worked. I mean, Kat brought up, an officer who just was passed around from one agency to another, and we know that they cross state lines too. So that will be a big one. And by the way, we also include the prisons and carceral setting employees. So it's going to be a big list. We're also going to be presenting a more unified view of our cases that are multi-agency. So if, for example, the CHP had an incident and it turned out to be the same incident as the sheriff, we're merging those cases into one, so you can just sort of see, who was there, as well as which agencies were responsible for doing something in that case. We'll also be creating very descriptive labels of every file. The file names are meaningless. Sometimes it's just like IA report 1.pdf, right? Which doesn't mean anything. So we're going to be using AI tools to figure out what's going on in each file and describe that to you. And lastly, we're going to be summarizing the sort of basic sequence of events of every case. So, we will tell you who the fact-checked officers are, but we also want to tell you, well, here's what happened. There was a taser shot, this person was injured, and then here's what else happened.
Thank you so much, Galen Machino. I really appreciate your ability here to bring the narratives of people into the hands of community, right? That is really critical and key as we embark on this journey of, the interdisciplinary work, right? The journalists, the data scientists, the community members attempting to figure out and identify what is truth, right? Leveraging evidence, preserving information, and making it possible for people to marinate with it. Okay.
One second. One of our advisory board members, Lisa, is in the audience, so I want to shout out the National Association for Criminal Defense Lawyers as well. I promise I didn't mean to leave him out.
Okay. Thank you again. So now I'd like to usher us into the next portion of this evening. First of all, how are y'all doing? Are y'all with me? Have you been informed? You feel like you got a little more knowledge than you had before? We've talked about legislation, right? Senate Bill 2, which is also known as the Kenneth Roth Jr. Police Decertification Act, which established this statewide system to decertify or suspend officers who have committed serious police misconduct, and defined it, right? A decertified officer means they can no longer be hired as a police officer in the state of California, and their name is added to this National Decertification Index. And so our next panel will focus on 3 people who in their own way, shape, or form are connected to this decertification process. I first like to bring up Cephas Uncle Bobby X Johnson, a national advocate for families impacted by police and state violence, and the co-founder of Love Not Blood campaign and Families United for Justice Network. He is the uncle of Oscar Grant and the brother of Wanda Johnson. For more than a decade, Uncle Bobby has worked alongside impacted families across California and the country to expose patterns of police violence, challenge prosecutorial inaction, and push for structural accountability, including decertification, transparency, and survivor-centered justice. He served on the Peace Officer Standards and Accountability Advisory Board during its first 2 years and has been reappointed to serve for the next 2 years. Okay, he testified before legislatures, worked with journalists, investigators, and helped families navigate cases, right? The thing that Kat talked about earlier, in which criminal charges were dismissed, but serious misconduct remained. His work focuses on how public records, community pressure, and policy tools like SB2 can be used to close accountability gaps and prevent officers with histories of harm from continuing to police. Give it up one more time for Uncle Bobby. All right, my next person I'm calling up is Jack Glazier. He's a professor at UC Berkeley's Goldman School of Public Policy. Scoot on in. Trained as a social psychologist studying stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination, he has focused his research efforts on racial disparities in policing for the past 25 years, before it was transparent, right? Jack served on the Peace Officer Standards Accountability Advisory Board for the first 2 years of its existence with Uncle Bobby, right? And he is a longtime member of the board of directors of the Center for Policing Equity on the Scientific Advisory Board of Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. He's an advisor to the California Department of Justice for the analysis and interpretation of police stop data, and an expert for the Floyd plaintiffs who prevailed in a lawsuit over New York City's use of stop and frisk. Jack has published extensively on racial bias and is the author of the book Suspect Race: Causes and Consequences of Racial Profiling. Another one for Jack. And then my last panelist, last but not least at all, we want to give an abundance of love to Amanda Mahel Blanco. She's a first-gen mother of twin boys, an artist at heart, and will be graduating this year with her BS in political science. She supported families such as Mario Gonzalez, Stephen Taylor, Augie Gonzalez, and many more other families impacted by state violence. Amanda's brother, Eric Salgado, was murdered by Highway Patrol in June of 2020. Since that terrible tragedy, she and her family continue to fight for justice. To this day, Eric's case has only gotten through civil settlement. Naturally, Amanda organized around her brother's death and quickly became connected to organizations doing movement work in Oakland and around the Bay. Direct service work has always been a lifelong career path and passion for Amanda. Currently, she works at a homeless shelter, still helping others and pursuing her own goals for justice for Eric, for the Justice for Eric campaign. She can't see herself doing any other work. Okay, let's give it up for our three panelists here. Oh my goodness. I feel like the night is just getting started, but we are in a round of just experts, and I'm really appreciative of us being grounded in this panel, because it's grounded in the lived experiences of others and the action that they take, right? Everybody in this room has their own set of lived experiences, and we make decisions. We have our own threshold of when we're willing to take action and how long we're willing to sustain that action. And it's important to recognize that that action is collective, right? Many of these people on the panel, although they didn't all know each other, they knew each other in some way, shape, or form because of the labor of love that they're doing. And so I do want to start with you, Uncle Bobby, which is, can you share about your loved one and what accountability has looked like or failed to look like in your case?
Sure. First, thank you all for being here. This is an extremely important time that we're in, and an important time for information so that we can take better advantage of the power we actually have in understanding how to use that power. Because we have power, but we're just not utilizing it, or we don't quite understand how to use it. And before I start, I'd just like to let me do a time check. I want to. Yeah.
We are on our time.
Oh, okay.
You got it.
I don't want to.
You got it.
Overdo this.
Hey, it's not on you. It's
Okay.
we together.
Right. This is important because this conversation, I called out to Addie to make sure that she's here. And many of you may know who Addie is. If you don't, I'm just going to do this real quick because part of my conversation is going to center around her direction. Yeah. Addie's grandson, Stephen Taylor, was killed in Walmart in San Leandro. Yeah. Anyone here don't know about Stephen Taylor? Raise your hand. If it's anyone in here, there's a few of you in here that don't. Okay, so quickly, he was killed in Walmart by Fletcher, what's first? Fletcher's first? Jason Fletcher. 5 years ago, charges filed on him for voluntary manslaughter, and then the DA drops the case just last month. So we spent 5 years fighting to get this officer held accountable, and then the DA drops the case. Yeah. So this is another tactic that they use to lessen our ability to have officers held accountable for the murders they commit. Yeah. All right. So my life journey has been about that. My nephew Oscar was murdered on January 1st, 2009, Fruitvale BARC Station. Immediately we realized that there was no oversight, and so we were able to get AB 1586 passed, citizen oversight with independent auditor. Of course, it continued, had some conversation about AB 71, the use of force data collection, that the only state in the United States has is the state of California that counts use of force by the DOJ. Then we pushed, I'm gonna cite these real quick because I want you to understand my journey. AB 953, the Racial Identification Profiling Act. Of course, I worked with Senator Skinner, testified on SB 1421, worked with Senator Skinner, testified on SB 16, which is an expansion of SB 1421. Went on to 490, the chokehold, went on to AB 392, the most strict use of force legislation in the nation. We changed the reasonable standard to the necessary standard, and there was others, but the final one, the last one, the one that I'm a part of and been blessed to be appointed to is SB 2, decertification legislation. There's power in that legislation, but we don't understand how to use it, but it's still in the oppressor's hand to manipulate it. You know what I'm saying? But my conversation is going to center around how do we empower our SB2 decertification to stop that wandering officer. And I don't, it would take me, I'm going to really try to just cut through and not really give all the details, but importantly, what I'm trying to say is this. Since I've been sitting on that advisory board, we know basically over 300 officers has been decertified. Okay. And a lot of that has to do with them voluntarily decertifying themselves because their act was so egregious, right? And then there's others, as we know, that are up for decertification, but they have to go through this administrative process. Decertification is not a charge of a criminal act, it's an administrative ability. We have the administrative power to hopefully keep this officer from ever being employed in the state of California, which is true, but they also go into the NDI, which is the National Decertification Index box, where agencies all across the country are supposed to comb that. There's no federal legislation that requires them to comb it. But if they go in there, they can still slip through the cracks and be hired in New York. Mm-hmm. Okay? So I just wanted to kind of get that out there. But I'm sorry, I got deviated. But I just want to hear the question again so that I can answer the question.
No, you answered the question. You did your homework, and I thank you for it. Thank you, Uncle Bobby. Thank you. Give him a round of applause for Uncle Bobby, because he just started off real strong. Give us a renewed sense of energy as it relates to all of this stuff, right? Because everything is so interconnected.
I'm so sorry.
Are you sure?
Yeah, just really quick. Okay. SB 1421, we were a part of the first hearing that the Contra County Police Union filed to stop the disclosure of the database or the information of the officer. We sat in there. And I'm going to tell you, one of the reasons why we actually won that case was because of my wife, Auntie B, that's sitting here, because she told, you got to hear this. This is why our voice matters. The attorney that was representing Petey Perez, Gerald, Richard Perez, the father of Petey Perez, the attorney that was representing him really felt like she was losing and wanted to quit. And my wife told her, do not quit. This is serious business. You got to fight. And do you know, she basically wanted to drop tears. Basically, she did. And she got up enough courage because we made her get some backbone. She went in that courtroom and she argued and we won. You hear what I'm saying? Woo.
No. I thank you. No, speak it, because there is so much power in community. There are so many elected officials who will not take action unless it is for the pressure of community. There are so many folks who have the skill set. I mean, I'm sure many people in this room who are like, I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do. But if you just listen to community, you might find yourself in the position to take action. And I'm so thankful. I want to move to Amanda because she also has a loved one who we spoke about earlier, her brother Eric, who passed away who was murdered by the state, who died by police in June of 2020. And just to reframe that, and in the public records database that I talked to y'all about earlier, we can see these different levels of documentation. Eric's records are still pending, while other cases like Mario Gonzalez have fuller documentation. What is the difference? What does that difference mean for families?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda, the sister of Eric Salgado. And it's been quite a journey. I think that thanks to APTP and Courage at the time when I was working with them, this happened in June of 2020, right after George Floyd, which happened like May 25th. So it was like a really crazy summer. When we finally did the public acts request with the help of APTP, when we got that information, I think it must have been maybe a year and a half after Eric had got killed. That whole year and couple months when he first got murdered was such a blur that I didn't actually gain the confidence or the motivation to actually I didn't even know there was something like a public acts request to even do. And so I actually didn't go through that process personally because I was just distraught. And so I was thankful to have help and support to actually be able to do the request, which I heard was a very tedious process. When we finally got the information, a lot of the stuff was redacted out of it. A lot of the stuff was blacked out. We actually got the dispatch audio. So it's true that we do get audio too. And it was the entire audio of what happened that night. So you can hear screaming, yelling in the background, but they took out the very important pieces. So it's like the pieces that we got we're just hearing for information, like just hearing, and we're like, oh my God, like, oh, to this day, I haven't heard it probably since then. And my brother's case stopped at a civil settlement, and hasn't been revisited by any DA. Nancy O'Malley was the DA at the time. I've worked with other families, including Stephen Taylor's, really closely with Mario Gonzalez, who was also murdered in 2021 by Alameda police. And that was another case that was also really dragged out, and I felt like we were just humiliated. They just humiliate us as families and say they care, and they run their campaigns on doing the right thing. And we get to this point, and then next thing you know, the public defenders or the prosecutors that are on our side, they don't have the balls to stand up for us. And we tried. Like for Mario Gonzalez, I had the honor to be able to be there through that process and stand with Mario Gonzalez's mom, Edith, along that process. And it's like, we tried to talk a backbone into those prosecutors, and they just couldn't. They completely put their hands up. It's like whatever happens indoors in the courts between the DA and the police officers, lawyers, and their unions and their money, it's like from going against the grain, So I think it's such a huge tool, the Public Request Act and all the stuff that you guys are doing now. It's such a good help. I actually tried to look up the officer who was actually a sergeant, by the way, who murdered my brother. It was 3 officers all together, but it was the sergeant who had completely did the whole thing. But so there might be some things that need to be updated on the stuff, or, obviously it's a work in progress. So, because sergeants are in there, highway patrol, and they all corroborate and they all talk. And during the civil settlement, we found that they had lied in their depositions that are recorded. And you would think that with all that evidence, that a case would actually make it, but it just stopped at civil settlement. And so these requests are so important and it helped me, but I wouldn't know. Like, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So I'm very grateful to have people in my life to help me get that information. It's very overwhelming. The lawyers, we actually asked the lawyers that were on our case, Burris, they also gave us information, but whatever was unsealed is what they could give us. So even the sealed information, they couldn't. Yeah.
I'm so thankful for y'all sharing these individual stories, because I think a lot of times when folks are thinking about police misconduct, police serious use of force, we sometimes think, okay, these are individual cases, and we don't because we only see them as individual cases, we're not able to really engage them side by side. We're not really able to engage and understand the way that these systems work, right? What was their position in the law enforcement? Who was the agency specifically? What was the history that, accompanies these individuals and the systems that they went through? And so I do want to bring my next question to Jack, just because, you were doing some of this, policing investigation 25 years ago, before we had, these intense, computational tools that we talked about today, and can kind of speak to the kind of the ways that case-by-case accountability systems struggle to address racial disparities and repeated harm. Can you talk to us from a research perspective about studying these cases in aggregate?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I need to confess as a professor and a data person that I like data. And I get excited to analyze data, mostly because I'm a psychologist and I want to use it to understand human psychology and what causes attitudes to lead to behavior. And that's hugely important. But I think in this context, eat the mic, right? I think in this context, what's really important is not data for data's sake, but actionable data. And that's what I'm hearing about, or what we were hearing about earlier, which is data that changes the way institutions operate. And so, one of the challenges of the stories is that while they're essential and we need to hear these stories and they move people and they motivate people, they're two-sided. And so the officer defendant has his or her story as well. And in a system that has a reasonable doubt standard and the doctrine of qualified immunity, the burden is so high that at the individual level, it's nearly impossible to get any kind of accountability in criminal law. And so that's an inherent problem, and stories cut both ways in that respect. With data, while it's not as moving, and it doesn't tell the full story, what we are able to do, as you put it, by aggregating together, is to discern patterns that are more probative in terms of convincing people of the disparities and of the inequities that are operating in policing. So, for example, prior to Michael Brown's killing in 2014, the national estimates of fatalities resulting from police use of force were in the ballpark of 500 a year. The Washington Post and other groups started collecting data systematically on this, looking at media reports, coroner's reports, and the like, and found it to be on the order of double that, more than 1,000 a year. And when we look at those data in the aggregate, we can see that among those who are fatally shot by the police, black victims are about twice as likely as white victims to be unarmed. And when you have the numbers and they're in the hundreds, and you can conduct the multivariate statistical analysis to statistically control for other variables that might be explained in the storytelling at the individual officer level, it can become quite compelling, and it can lead to laws like the Racial and Identity Profiling Act and others. So I think the aggregation of the data is really important, and the stories are hugely important. And one thing I just want to add is that in my work with Uncle Bobby on the SB2 Police Accountability Advisory Board, one of the most compelling days of the 8 or so hearings that we've had to date was when a considerable contingent from Vallejo showed up and made public comment, and the chair, to her credit, gave them ample time to make public comment, and it was palpable. And I think that for those of us on the board who had varying degrees of prior experience, it was very moving. And I would like to think that for the staff at the Peace Officers Standards and Training who are responsible for implementing the law, that it maybe moved the needle for them a little bit as well.
Just a quick follow-up on that piece that you said. I'm curious, like, you know, how common, you just spoke to the importance of community members, family members, impacted folks coming through and doing these public comments in person, via email, message, or however, however they self-select, because it has power and importance. But I'm curious, how common is public comment at these meetings? You said it has a huge impact, but just real quick, how common does that?
And I'll let Uncle Bobby answer too. Not nearly common enough. And so the room, so where we held these hearings, or I'm done with it, but where we were holding these hearings, there's an area for the public, and it's largely populated by staff of Post, by the state agency. And then it will include the officers who maybe, if they show up, the officers whose hearings are happening that day, and maybe they're advocates. And so there's an imbalance in the room, and then there's the board that has at least 3 members of it out of 9 who are law enforcement professionals, and so we need greater balance in that room. Now that's a lot to ask, though, because it takes time and it takes energy and it takes emotion to go up and show up for that out in West Sacramento, but it's got to be done, and it's powerful. And that's the other thing, is that we need to balance out that discussion, because we're sitting there voting on whether somebody is going to lose their livelihood and their identity. These officers, it's a big deal for them to get decertified, and we're doing it right in front of them, and they're sitting at the end of the table, and we have to look them in the eye and vote on it. It would be really helpful to have some members of the public who are also looking us in the eye at the same time.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And I am going to run it to Uncle Bobby next, because, obviously he has been on this board. But I'm curious, could you break it down for the crowd today, like what accountability tools exist and where do they fail? I feel like we've spoken to this already a little bit about this kind of like series of accountability steps, but I just want to make space for you to like put that on the table for us real quick before we talk about despite these advances in like this process, what barriers people still face, families still face.
Sure, and forgive me for getting a little excited when I first started.
No.
But it's a burning thing in me. Yes, it's a fire in me concerning this matter. But what accountability tools do we have available to us? I believe the question was asked. Yes, and before, I'll say 2015, 2017, we had 0. A DA filed the charges, and as we know how that would go. Yeah. Or the agency will contemplate even holding an officer accountable, but we might yell loud enough for them to say, okay, well, the DA's got to press charges, and then we know where that goes. Rarely ever happened. So today, and I'm going to cite Stephen Taylor again, I think it was in 2022, 2020, Fletcher killed Stephen Taylor. 2022, there was a oversight committee put in place with an independent auditor. that came from the community. You know, of course, they had been talking about it, but Stephen Taylor was the flashpoint. So sadly, for all these tragedies that we experienced, there's an opportunity for us to move the needle a little bit closer to getting accountability. And for those who don't know, when Oscar was murdered, it was because of all of you standing with us, crying with us, going back and forth to court with us. Most importantly, shouting out, "I am Oscar Grant." We were able to get, for the first time in California state history, an officer arrested, charged, convicted, and sent to jail. Right? But we as a family knew we didn't really get accountability because he only got involuntary manslaughter. And so the question became, what is it that we can do? What kind of tools we had available? And I began to search and found we didn't have any. So of course, now today we have, of course, citizen oversight agencies. We have independent auditors along with those particular citizen oversight committees. We have what we could talk about, SB2, decertification. You know, we have these tools, but to give an example of how we have them, but we don't use them, if the San Leandro Social Justice Group in San Leandro go to the Citizen Review Board meeting in San Leandro where Stephen Fletcher worked and pushed that agency or that oversight committee to take it to the next level. In other words, make sure that Post actually hears about Stephen Taylor to get it filed as a complaint with possibility to be decertified. That is another avenue. Now, just be clear, decertifying officers is not putting them in jail. Okay? It's just an administrative process to make sure he never works for the police officers again. So that is a form of accountability. I forget his name, that killed Alan Bluford. If we remember right, we posted his picture all over the city of Oakland, made it so traumatizing for him, he had to leave the city of Oakland. Another form of accountability. You get what I'm saying? So we have tools that we can use, but we fail to use them. What's happening now with our citizen oversight with the independent auditor is that they're not elevating or escalating that particular officer to Post to be decertified. So we got to start showing up and telling them, wait a minute, we put you in place. Now you have a responsibility to at least put that officer name at Post to be possibly decertified. We're not doing that. And this is my call out to the data technicians in the room that built the Public Records Act, is that this is real important. We need to begin to monitor every single citizen oversight board with the independent auditor to ensure that that officer that killed someone in that agency, and I'm sitting on the board, is referred to Post for possible decertification. And we have avenues to use the civil complaint. There's depositions that are taken that shows lies. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? The fact that the agency will lag on doing it. And so we have to find ways to do it. Showing up, and I'll pin it with this, showing up to the decertification, or we'll say Post, or the advisory board, the board that we sat on, is very impactful. But one of the things you're not going to get there is the ability to really raise that officer name, because it's not about a hearing, right? It's really about policy and procedures and steps in that nature. But you have the ability to file a complaint with Post outside the agency so that they can begin to look at it, but it's not just verbal. You know, you got to have the documentation to show, especially in Stephen Taylor's place, with the fact that it's been through the process. So you have a lot of documentation to show that Post can look at to really come up with what we would consider an unfit police officer that don't need to be working for the state of California, period. You know, I mean, I can go on and on with this because I have a lot of stuff be just turning in my head.
No, nothing wrong with it, and I really do appreciate the energy that you're bringing to this panel this evening. I feel like it's, you know, all of y'all are speaking to something so important in this history, this moment in time, right? Not only like where we're going, but also where we came from. And so I do want to round out this panel, just close us out real quick with Amanda before we open it up for questions and answers. Questions? which is just like, despite the advances of this legislation, and these different options for folks coming up, pulling up, talking and doing all the things, like what barriers still exist, like for families, and the barriers could be like systems, it could be personal, it could be whatever you feel and embody in this moment.
Thank you. I just want to say, Uncle Bobby, so right now, because my brother's case is at a halt, technically, we've actually started trying to do that paperwork for post to review, which is a lot of work you gotta do. It is a tedious. We've actually the Justice for Eric campaign, we've kind of had it on a halt for right now, because it's just a lot of life stuff going on, right? But I just want to uplift that I'm grateful to have you in my life and to know that you're on the post board, and the fact that I do feel just a slimmer of light of hope that by doing that tedious work and having the support system that I have to be able to do all that paperwork to eventually turn it in, and hopefully Sergeant Richard Henderson, that's his name, y'all, gets decertified. It was 3 of them, so y'all can look up Eric Salgado, y'all, you can find out the other names yourself. But yeah, those officers got on paid administrative leave, and they went to a whole other county. And for the whole year, their names were actually on protective order. So we actually didn't know the names of the officers until a year later. That's another thing. Until a whole year later, and that was some kind of court order thing because they feared for their life or whatever. Barriers, challenges. So it's 5 years in, about to be 6. I'll speak for myself, and I'll speak for other close families that I still kind of stay in contact with. It's been definitely a journey. The grieving process, I'm still grieving to this day. And it's hard because it's like that saying that I heard 5 years ago, it's like that family you don't want to be a part of, but we're a part of it, and so we have to stick together. And I know we all go through our individual challenges. And some of us go MIA, and some of us come back in. Some of us go out the mix because we get burnt out, and it's a lot. And some of us are the only ones holding it. You have a group of families come, and they come when it's the anniversary, or they come and it's a whole community event and it's free, and hey, you show up as a guest, and then that's it. And then we all go back to our regular lives, but the families are just continuing they still gotta go to work, they might have kids, life goes on. And so I think for me personally, trying to stay busy, trying to stay connected, trying to still help people in whatever way that I can. I'm not actually with the organization I started with when I was doing this work. I'm very grateful for APTP and very grateful for Courage to actually had given me that platform to be able to work with other families during that period of time. Now I currently work at a homeless shelter, so I'm just still, giving to the people, but doing a little bit different kind of work. So I've slowed down a little bit. But definitely sometimes it gets hard because it feels like I'm not doing enough for my brother. And it's always easier to help others because my brother's case is so damn complicated that, if I feel stressed out, I know the people who are helping me organize are stressed out too. But it helps to check in on that person, and even if you don't know what that feels like personally, but to be involved and organized in every single rally that you can possibly come to, or a court hearing that you can come to, and stay in touch and share that post or on Facebook, on Instagram or whatever, it really does make a difference. And life goes on, the matters of the heart. We may not ever understand why that officer did that or what really went down that night, and they try to get ahead of it. They put out the narrative. That narrative is real. And people who didn't know my brother, they took the police narrative real quick because they chewed him up and brought up all the other things that had nothing to do with why they killed him, and he was unarmed as well, by the way. And so yeah, I guess I'll just I'll share that. But I just very honored to have you guys have me here and to be here in solidarity with other families. Sometimes I feel, or some of us, at least I'll speak for myself, that I feel guilty sometimes, you know, because I feel like I could be doing so much more. So much more, but there's only so many hours in a day, right? And so as long as y'all keep inviting me to beautiful events like this and having me uplift my brother's name and other names that just get buried in the media that we don't ever hear about because there was no video or no camera footage, so it just kind of gets ignored. Uplift those families and show up for them, you know, because we go through stuff too. But we're always going to show up for other families all the time because that's all we got. So I'll share it back.
Thank you so, so much. Everybody, give a round of applause for this incredible panel. Give a round of applause for everyone who has spoken for us tonight. I mean, it is really so deep, and it's big ancestor energy in the room tonight. For the question and answer portion, I do want to invite Galen back up to the stands. Here, you can take my seat, Galen. I'm a stand up because apparently abundance mindset. Oh, Lord have mercy. Wow. So I want to open it up for questions. I want to give us maybe an extra 5 minutes. It's like 7:30 now. I want to give us 7 minutes at least to just kind of answer some questions, hear some thoughts from the crowd, and then run it back to the panelists who we have with us today. Is there anyone here immediately with a burning question? And if you have it, do you feel comfortable shouting, or do you say it? I'm going to repeat it. How about that? Sound good? Yolanda Rodriguez. Ramirez. Mm-hmm. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come on. I want to hear you. I think they want to hear you too. Go ahead. Otra vez. One more time.
Sure. Again, the officers smashed her head into the side of the cruiser. Basically, she was brain dead at that point, and they pushed her into the back of the cruiser, left her there for about 20 to 45 minutes without ever checking on her. When they did, she was already brain dead, and she was taken off life support 4 or 5 days later. She was unarmed, a grandmother. This was the first encounter ever with the police in her life, and it's been terrible for the family, as we all connected. It's horrific. And then the disrespect from the city council. But and thank God for the Colin Kaepernick Foundation for the second autopsy, because of course the first one from the county, she died of natural causes. The second one found a fracture at the base of her skull, front blunt trauma to her face. And that's what we're going forward with. But again, 45 days are supposed to release footage. They passed it. We're going on 107, 110 days. So, but we're standing strong. I'm thankful to be here. This is my brother. It was his wife of 50 plus years, and he's without his partner and his love, and I'll let him.
Yes, like all incidents like this, the last time I saw her, she was on her way to pick up her brother to take him to find out some doctor's appointments for him. And when she got there, their sister would not let him come out. And anyway, they used a justification of that she was trying to flee the scene, which she's 72 years old, had mobility issues. Even if they gave her a 45-minute head start, they would still get her at the end of the street. She did not even think of running. In high school, she accepted a D rather than run the track. So there's no way that physically she would run. She never even thought of doing that. It was a one-way street. There was other police cruisers in the street. There's no way that she could get into the car and drive away. So that was a reason for arresting her. They made her kneel on the cement, 72 years old, with her hands handcuffed behind her back. It was hard for her to get up and down without even being handcuffed, because we watched our grandkids. We had been doing this for the last 13 years. We've been watching our grandkids, and I would watch her changing the diapers, and it would take her 5 minutes to kneel down and try and get up. And so all these lies that they put out, even in the newspapers, there's misrepresentation, outright lies, and people read it and assume that this is true without knowing the facts of what had happened. And so, of course, they go online and say, well, she tried to flee, she shouldn't have tried to do that, and they don't understand that it's not what the police put out. Like my brother said, the city council didn't much care. The city attorney spent all her time looking at her cell phone. You could see the glow of her phone, and she had no interest in it. To this day, still has no interest in it. Nobody seems to want to do anything. That's why we're coming here to try and get more information and help us out.
Yes, say her name, Yolanda Ramirez. Justice, yes, Yolanda, a elder, an ancestor now. And thank you for sharing. I feel that's a really integral part about these kinds of gathering spaces, is that we find each other, right? Sometimes it's hard to find each other. All right, I have another question in the front. Here we go.
This question is for Uncle Bobby, his colleague, and whoever the gentleman was earlier talking about the national index. Okay, how you mentioned that it takes time for us to get these records when we file these for the Public Records Act. It does take time. I've experienced that myself. They don't want to give up, and then when they don't give up everything. How hard is it to get legislators to rewrite a bill? My thing is when a lawsuit is filed, when an officer involved shooting, death, in custody death ever takes place, you have a 2-year window to actually file these. First you have a 6-month window, and then I think you have a 2-year window after that. Well, if you don't get the evidence until the 2 years, because they're holding on to the evidence, how hard is it to rewrite that bill?
Anybody? Go ahead, Uncle Bobby.
I'm going to answer that. It's a 2-part question. For the family that just spoke, what was her name? Yolanda's family. I just want you to hear this. The question centered around how long does it take to get particular legislation passed and what have you, right? We've pushed for AB 748. That's the release of the video and audio within 45 days so that the family don't have to suffer trying to figure out what happened. And yet, you didn't even get it in 45 days. John that is sitting here, AB 481, the militarization, I forget, but anyway, it has to do with military-grade equipment being in policing agencies throughout the state of California. We got that passed, but we're not able to make sure that these agencies are reporting what they have like they're supposed to, right? Or we got, as Ms. Terry Levitt, I'm sorry, Terry, just shared and asked. So for us, right, when I first started the campaign, and we'll talk about the most serious one that we're speaking of today, SB 1421, that brought us to this public police record access database. Our first go around, we failed. We're talking about a 2-year cycle. And then, I forget how Senator Skinner did it, but she twisted it, and we started a new 2 years, and we got it passed. So the process of getting legislation passed, as any of us know, is not some straightforward, easy task. Sometimes we give up way too much, and we have a toothless bill. Sometimes we try to put too many teeth in it, and we don't even get it passed. And then there's times we get it passed, but we don't even show up for the city council meetings to make sure that the bill is being used like it's supposed to be used. So a lot of times we drop the ball. You see what I'm saying? And when we work 2 and 3 years to get a bill passed, then nobody else shows up thinking that, okay, we done won. We done made it. It's over. We got it passed. Accountability is in place. What we find out is that it's not in place. Even with SB2. SB2 is in place for us to use. However, our our citizen review boards, our independent auditors, our policing agencies are not reporting to posts so that those role officers like Fletcher can be decertified. They don't even know Fletcher exists probably. You get what I'm saying? So we have to, as a community, ensure that your citizen oversight in San Leandro is fully aware that this community has put you in place, and now we need you to elevate this to posts, and got to be loud about it. We got to show up. The only way we're going to get it passed is showing up like this in here. But anyhow, that's my feed on that. You know, it takes work. It don't just happen overnight.
Thank you, Uncle Bobby. And just to your point, I want to echo something that Kat Brooks said earlier, which is that implementation is critical. And so the passage of the law, the construction of the law and the legislation is one thing, but they can only convey the spirit of the law through the letter of the law. And it's the agencies like POST, or in the case of Racial and Identity Profiling Act, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, which is a much more progressive agency. The implementation matters a lot. So in the case of SB2, the implementation has been pretty pallid. And they've relegated us to basically being an appeals board. And that could be affected in revision of the regulations, and that's why it's important to show up and to protest.
Thank you so much. And just affirming that, like, civilians as record keepers, we create the records. We take a stance and make an effort for an archive of a record that is ultimately, seen later on, right? If we don't come forward, if the people don't come forward to share their stories, to talk about what has transpired, the state will ask, did it really happen? Is it really real? I want to close us out with one more question, and then we're going to give hold on. Okay, we're going to close us out with 2 more brief questions. Are y'all with me? Thank you so much. Here you go. I'm going to start here. I'm going to end there. Or maybe I should start there and end you, because you seem like a finisher. I think you're a finisher. Come on, bro. Can you come a little closer to me just so I can give you this mic? Go ahead.
I don't really need the mic. I talk very loud.
No, I think we need it because of video and things.
Okay, say less. I had a question on behalf of you, sir. What was your name? In the middle? No, this guy right here. Jack. What was it? How do you use your data to determine people's psyche?
That's a great question.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I lost my track of mind. I said, hold on. I ain't even thinking about
Pass. No, but it's a really profound question. And, I could go on for days, and I do for my poor students, but it's, we can run experiments and try to understand, and surveys and the like, to try to understand people's psychology, but that's not what we're dealing with here, and you can't run experiments on lethal force. So all we have available to us are the observational data of what's actually happened, and that data isn't perfect, it's highly imperfect. And so we're put in the position of making inferences about people's psychology and what drove them to do things. What we can do is we can draw from the psychological literature that we have. So for example, there's an extensive literature showing that the average person, including black police officers, are faster in a simulation to shoot armed black men than to shoot armed white men, and faster to show the response of not shooting unarmed white men than unarmed black men. And we can draw from that data that's been experiments conducted on police and community members and college undergraduates to say that helps us to understand why when police in Sacramento go in hot and around a blind corner and shoot Stephon Clark when he's holding a telephone, that's probably that kind of error that is avoidable. And I do want to add another policy dimension to this, which is that so much of this comes down to what's called final frame analysis, which is what was the officer thinking in the final moments, in the last instances of what they were doing. And there has to be, and there is starting to be legislatively, a fix to put more responsibility on the psychology of the officers prior to that final frame moment and what they're doing going into that and how they're creating the toxic situation that leads to fatality. But thank you for that question. It's beyond me.
Thank you so much. So grateful. And now we're going to close out with our very last question. Thank you again for your patience, for bracing with us. Please remember there are sandwiches in the room. All right. Go ahead. Tell us your name, too.
My name is Addie Kitchen. I'm Stephen Taylor's grandmother, and I want to ask Uncle Bobby, is there a time limit when you can start the paperwork for decertifying an officer?
And I think I made a big mistake. I didn't even ask, did anyone understand or know what SB2 is? Decertification legislation. If you're not clear what it is, just raise your hand. It's okay. Woo, maybe half the room, huh? So that's my fault. I got too excited. But anyhow, there's no time limit to file a request to post to have them decertified, right? It's retroactive. So even I'm looking up Meserly to make sure that he's under decertifying queue to be decertified in case for what we know, he changed his name, right? So to make sure that he is not employed nowhere in the state of California, but I'm also going to be pinpointing the National Decertification Index to make sure his name is in there, that he's not in New York working. But anyhow, there is no time limit to filing a request to post to have an officer decertified. Keep that in mind. So we could go back as far as you want in time. They do have a backlog, as Jack and I know, of over 32,000 police officers that are in queue to be decertified. So you can imagine the time that that's going to take, because it's retroactive. It's retroactive. So thank you for putting the work in to create that public police record data, because when I heard about it and I got that link, I jumped right in there, and the first name I clicked up was Fletcher and Meserly, the one that killed Oscar Grant. Johannes Meserly.
All right, y'all. Let's give another round of applause for our panelists, for our folks who were discussing with us, for the folks who worked on this project. Give a round of applause to yourselves for showing up this evening and for sticking through. We are 15 minutes past the deadline here. And just remember to take care of yourselves, to take deep breaths, to find ways to plug into this interdisciplinary work. It is, we cannot, no one can do this alone. This does not happen in a vacuum. It is the true work of many people coming together to make something shake. I'm Trina Reynolds-Tyler, Trina T. Trill on the internet. Thank you for having me, and I will see you very soon. Thank you.